Hello, my name is Georg Hinkel, and in this short video, I'm going to explain you how you can implement encryption for your SiLA 2 server based on the Tecan SiLA 2 SDK. So in the last video, I've already shown you how to create a server and the client for a simple functionality. This greeting service that basically is a feature with only one command to basically perform return a greeting and saying hello. Now, I did one modification here. I basically did something that is pretty useful for the development purposes. Namely, I start the server on the loopback interface, so on IP address 127.0.0.1. And if we start the server, you'll notice that in the logs, you basically see that no certificates found. The server will start with plaintext communication. So by default, servers, we don't create a new certificate on the fly, so servers by default start with plaintext communication. How do you change that? For that, I forgot, you do need the UUID of the server. So the server always uses the same UUID, unless there's no configuration, in which case a new ID is rolled, but we'll need that for the certificate. And to create a certificate, the SiLA 2 SDK comes with a specific command. So there's a command in SiLA Gen. Let's first execute the help for this. So help generate certificate. So and let's make this a bit bigger and review the options that you have. So the first required option is actually the path to the certificate authority key file. That means it's basically the key for your certificate authority. So this file is something that you should store on a secret location and don't put it really on a sophisticated place. Then there's the password for the certificate authority. That is also very important because those key files are usually password protected. Then you have a couple of options that you can specify as you like. So one is a duration. So by default, the certificates generated are valid for 10 years. But you can change that if you wanted to. The country that should appear on the certificate, by default, it's just taking the ISO country specification of the current region that you're in. And you can also add a location, an organization, and a unit, and all this appears in the certificate afterwards. And then you have the two value parameters. One is the target server UUID for which the certificate is issued. So that's why I just copied that from the logs from the server, and the directory in which the certificate should be stored. So let's execute this thing. And I copied the server UUID, and we need to specify the certificate authority. So I don't have any. So my hello SiLA 2 folder is empty, in which case the tool will actually generate me a certificate authority, a local one. So my CA path is ca.key. And the password will be path:1111, super secret password. And yeah, and let's go. So as you can see, if you're familiar with OpenSSL, this is an OpenSSL output. So this command that SiLA Gen is using is basically just a wrapper around OpenSSL. So it requires that OpenSSL is on your path. Now what it created, we basically have now a couple of files. So the CA certificate, so the certificate of the certificate authority that we are using, the key file of the certificate, the server certificate, and the key file of the server, and the certificate signing request for the server. Now, this thing is actually something that only is used to create the server certificate, so it's not used. You can delete it or do whatever with it. The certificate is a CA certificate is basically something that describes the certificate authority, which is public. And this file is something that you basically have to store in some secret location if you want that this certificate authority has any value, basically. So normally you should store that somewhere in the safest place that you have in your company network. For now, we'll just leave it here. And we then take the certificate of the certificate authority, the server certificate, and the key file of the server, and store that in the build output. So it's usually here. Just paste it there. And then we can actually, I'm going to start the server without debugging so that we can use a debugger for the client. And here you can see in the logs, it found the certificate and the server is starting with TLS. And then let's go to the client. As I said, as I told you earlier, I changed the server to a configuration like to run on the loopback address. Loopbacks are not by default considered in the discovery. So what I also have to do here is to basically say, okay, I just specify a filter here, and I want to discover only on the loopback addresses here. So I'll just say that we discover only on the loopback, on the loopbacks. So it would also run the server discovery on the IPv6 loopback address, but actually the server is using the IPv4 loopback only. And if we start the client, we should set up as a startup project and then start the client. And then fast forward to here. Okay, it's taking 5 seconds because I basically look for 5 seconds in throughout the world and then try see what you can find. And it did find a server, namely, okay, I just put server in there, server 1.0, and if you can remember, this is exactly the UUID. So this is basically the server, and we also see that the features is this one. Yeah, this is one is the greeting service actually. So it is basically the server. And how does that work? So because the problem is here that the Tecan SiLA 2 SDK uses the native gRPC implementation. And this native gRPC implementation only accepts connections where you know the certificate and authority in advance. And this works because the server announces the certificate that it is using already via discovery. And that is why you can actually manage to connect to the server. Now, if you have servers that use different implementations or older servers using older versions of the SiLA 2 SDK, they would not provide the certificate authority via discovery. In this case, you basically have to use a different implementation of the server connector in which you basically have to specify the certificate authority. But for this version of the SiLA 2 SDK and for servers that really that comply with the SiLA 2 standard in that they in that they announce their certificate authority that they're using via discovery already, then this also works with a completely self-signed certificate. And, let me just execute this client here again, such that you can see that this worked. So we have here on the console this hello client. You won't see those logs on your console probably. Those appear basically because I have a gRPC traces enabled. If you want to do that, there's a separate environment variable that you have to set. Just consult the gRPC documentation for that. Yeah, and so here, this is very simple actually to implement security using the Tecan SiLA 2 SDK. And thanks for listening.